You're listening to an excerpt from my book, The Path is Everywhere, a guided journey into deep rest, the mystery of presence, and the forgotten places within. If you'd like to explore the full audio and receive the complete ebook, you can find that information in the description below. Chapter 3: The Crucible of the Broken. The Invitation of the Broken. At times, a broken heart will appear as your teacher, and you will be asked to place your raw, shaky vulnerability on the altar before you. The invitation of the broken is rarely sweet or peaceful, but is always reorganizing and whole. The freedom you are longing for is found inside me, it says, not in sending me away with spiritual process. Your ancient companion, Aloneness, has arrived as a clarifying wisdom guide from beyond, along with your fellow travelers, the moon and the stars. They have come to walk with you on a blessed journey. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be sad, really. For just one moment, allow sadness to be here. No shame, no blame, no urgent self-improvement project, just sad. It's so holy. The presence of sadness is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It does not mean anything about who you are or your inherent value as a person, or that you have failed or lost your way. It means that you are alive. Go ahead, be sad, but be sad fully. Set aside the resistance to this movement within you and allow it to express itself. Share its secrets and bestow its gifts upon a world that has forgotten the purity of the broken. Love is full spectrum and will unleash all of its children here, including sadness, to awaken itself in form. It is an act of profound kindness to turn into the open, achy caverns of the heart and seed them with holding. Dare to see that the presence of sadness is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It does not mean that you have done life and relationships wrong, or that you are lacking in faith, trust, or gratitude. It doesn't mean you have forgotten a secret, need to meditate better, or become more adept at staying in the present moment, or that you're unlovable or beyond redemption. It means that you're human and you're whole. Thank God for that, for your ability to feel and to have your heart be touched by others and by this life. Perhaps what this world needs is more broken, open hearts. Sadness is not something you need to fix, cure, or transform. It need not be healed, but held. You need not shift sadness into some higher state or apply teaching so it will yield into something else, for it is complete and pure on its own. You need not pathologize your sadness or fall into the spell of a world that has abandoned the wisdom buried inside the broken pieces. Stay close to your sadness and surround it with curiosity, presence, and warmth. With the fire of awareness and with the ally of your breath, descend underneath the story of the sadness and into the crucible of the body, where the sadness dwells, and makes its luminous home. Go on a journey into the core of the feelings, sensations, and images, and into the raw, shaky life that is longing to be held. The Traveler of Aloneness. As an alive, sensitive human being, at times you will encounter a familiar sense of loneliness as it seeps into your awareness and begins to color your world. What is this visitor, you wonder, and what does it want from me? You question whether it will ever go away, when it will yield to your deep longing for connection, and why all the work on yourself has not yet transformed the unknowing despair. The feeling of loneliness is a reminder of separation and has a way of cutting into the aliveness of immediate experience. The reality of aloneness, on the other hand, is an expression of intelligence and is surging with life. Despite our connection with others, we are asked to make the journey alone. No one can experience life for us, love and be loved for us, embrace and feel our achy heart for us, or die for us, nor can we for them. The Traveler of Aloneness is at home in this environment and even welcomes it, knowing that organizing her reality around love will inevitably trigger the experience of tender, penetrating vulnerability. Living in the delicate field of aloneness is so fragile, so unknown and unbearably touching. It is always uncertain, shaky, and groundless, and a piercing reminder of how open it really is here, revealing the disorienting truth that you can never really look to the known to tell you who you are or why you've come here. It's a penetrating invitation to live your life, for you cannot live someone else's. Within the environment of purifying aloneness, we know that at any moment our hearts may break, that we may fall in love in the most excruciating way, and that we will likely be asked to meet deep waves of feeling and sensation. We know that as we open in this way, we will no longer be able to avoid true intimacy, the certainty of being exposed, and the reality that who we think we are may always be falling apart and reconfiguring. We realize that without our conscious knowing, we have vowed to turn toward the nakedness of this life, to enter directly into uncertainty, suffering, darkness, and light, guided by the unknown and a love from beyond. It's not easy to live in such an open and unguarded way, yet here we are. Though related, the experience of loneliness is usually born out of a resistance to our present experience, of turning from feelings of grief, sadness, hurt, and shame, as well as from more positive feelings that are too exposing, including intimate experience of all kinds. When we are unwilling to provide a home for these feelings, we feel cut off from life, lonely and disconnected. We long at the deepest levels to know the entirety of what we are. Anything short of that is never going to meet our primordial cry for wholeness. On some level, we intuit that each visitor, whether invited or otherwise, is its own unique doorway into presence, into one of the unique crystalline qualities of love. And we become lonely when we abandon those parts that only long to be allowed back home. The only way out is through, and the only way through is by love. While the mind is sure to forget this simple yet revolutionary truth, the body knows, the heart knows. For many of us interested in the spiritual journey, this embrace of direct experience is something we have learned as a conceptual goal. As we deepen our inquiry, we may notice a hidden agenda lurking in the background. I'll sit with this feeling of sadness, grief, shame, or fear because I've been told that's what I'm supposed to do. And when I do it right, the feeling will transform. I'll be healed and free to carry on with my life. This orientation is evidence of a subtle resistance to our experience, and thus continues to support the ongoing encounter with loneliness, with that sense of cut-offness. And when this intention is primary, we move toward our experience not out of curiosity or love of the truth, but unconsciously in service to and reenactment of earlier strategies of aggression and self-abandonment. With clear awareness, we just begin to see how these dynamics might be operating in us, that's all. No shame, no blame, no self-attack, just more awareness and more kindness. We can make use of even this behind-the-scenes agenda as a way to come closer to ourselves and lay down new paths of empathic attunement. Nothing is rejected on the journey of love. All is path. It is so bittersweet, really, being an open-hearted human being, one who is simultaneously broken and whole, can feel so fragile, so precarious. Our old friends, sadness, grief, jealousy, hopelessness, and rage are often sent out the back door of our hearts and into a lonely forest. This is sad. Please don't go. Stay close. Let us keep the door open to them, moment by moment, crafting a warm home and safe refuge for the entirety of what we are. For in doing so, the path from loneliness to aloneness will become illumined. Aloneness is a sacred friend, but its mysteries and power have been lost in a world that is forgotten. Its invitation is direct, relentless and shattering, but also filled with deep peace, creativity, and stillness. It is a deep call from within to return to what is most important, a portal like no other into a transmuting sort of heartbreak. Not the heartbreak of the mind, convinced that something has been lost, but the shattering reorganization that comes by way of revelation of what has finally been found. The gift of melancholy. What is the role of that feeling state we call melancholy on the journey of re-embodiment and the path of the heart? In my experience, melancholy is a very misunderstood and therefore often unmet energy in our psyches, in our hearts, and in our culture at large. So much of our effort, psychologically, spiritually, and societally, is fixated upon becoming happy, feeling good, and abandoning any feelings that do not immediately conform to these states. As with other raw feeling states such as vulnerability, embarrassment, or disappointment, we tend to disembody from melancholy, concluding its mere presence is evidence that something is wrong with us. If melancholy comes to visit, we'll scramble to change, heal, or transform it, replacing it with more spiritual or healthy thoughts, feelings, or states of being. Shouldn't we be more grateful, we wonder, more in the now, more forgiving, joyful, in a state of oneness? Surely if we're evolving on the path, we would at some point set aside lesser states such as melancholy, sorrow, despondency. We would leave their low vibration behind and replace them with something much higher and more spiritually impressive. Before we cut into the experience of melancholy too quickly, however, let us take a moment to turn and face it and finally see what it has to say. To dare to consider that melancholy is an utterly valid experience that contains important information for our journey. Perhaps he or she has been with us for many years, the melancholic one, and has never felt safe enough to come forward. Or we have not been interested enough in the wisdom this one carries. The experience of melancholy contains a unique signature and fragrance, and when explored can open us and reveal a hidden connection with others, the natural world, and with our own hearts. The direct embodied experience of melancholy has a way of shattering old hopes and dreams, who we thought we were and what we've come to think we need, illuminating the shadows of our unlived lives. As an experiment, you could look out for this visitor as it appears in your experience and invite this one into intimate communion. In this meeting, you may discover that melancholy is not an obstacle on your path, but is a misunderstood emissary of integration, and will come from time to time to remind you of something rich and mysterious that may have been covered over in the busyness of becoming. You are not a project to be solved. It is unlikely today is going to be the day when you figure your life out, when you heal your past, resolve all your wounding, get all your questions answered, or know what is coming next. It is unlikely today will be the day you finally manifest all the great things you think will make you happy. Call in the soulmate that will complete you, permanently wiggle into some state of high vibration, invulnerability, and freedom from confusion. Or complete some mythical journey of spiritual awakening, landing in a fabulous ongoing state of untouchability. What a relief, a day of celebration of what you are and of the end of the dream of postponement. You need no longer delay full embodied participation in the miracle as it surges out of the darkness, the fragility, the shakiness, and the uncertainty. The invitation is into the opposites and the contradictions, where that which is unknown and unprecedented is taking form, where the energies of separation and union co-emerge and spin out the relative world. Yes, today may not be the day for answers, but to finally let your heart break open to the vastness of the question. To stand on the rooftops and proclaim that you are not a project to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. Buried inside the glory and the mess. Right in the core of the not knowing is pure creativity. This is what you are. Love has come into form somehow by some grace, as your feelings, as your imagination, as your body, and as the ragingly unique signature of the cells of your heart. There is no greater miracle than this. It is complete. You are complete. Return into slowness and into this current breath. which contains all of the seen and unseen worlds. You are here, rippling and pregnant with life, and there is no urgency on the path of wholeness. An experiment in self-care. You may be accompanied throughout your day by subtle feelings of slight panic, anxiety, and a cosmic sort of restlessness. Perhaps you feel it as you wake, some vague sense that something is missing or just off. Nothing specific is going wrong that you can identify. Nonetheless, you cannot quite rest or fully engage the life that you know is possible. Somehow the aliveness, the creativity, the intimacy, they are so near yet so far out of reach. But you can't quite pinpoint what is going on. At sunset, at dusk, as you listen to certain music, walk in nature, or gaze up into the sky, or as you are falling into the dream world at night, as you wander through the world, as you come in contact with an unnameable but vivid longing within you, or as you become aware of some images of the way you thought it was all going to turn out. The death of an old dream, a relationship you were sure would last forever, a career that unexpectedly fell apart, a friend who is no more. It is tempting to try to locate the source of the unsettling feelings, to attach them to something someone said, to a way you're not being seen or understood, to the fear of an anticipated future scenario, to a loss that has occurred or is impending, or to some specific aspect of your life situation that isn't flowing the way you'd prefer. But whatever you come up with, while it seems to potentially be a part of what is happening, you have a deeper sense that you're still not penetrating to the source. It's as if a certain ancient existential uneasiness was wired into you and cannot be approached by conceptual process. The mind is just too slow, too dense to reach it. But something is brewing in your organs, in your cells, in your heart, and starting to emerge from out of the depths of your body, from the deepest caverns within your psyche, from even deeper than what we normally refer to as personal. It's almost archetypal in nature, arising out of the earth itself, more of a collective shakiness and unease. In the face of this, it can feel as if there is great urgency, that you must take some action in response, to find secure ground from which to orient and take the next step. But is something actually wrong? Or is everything okay? Is there a problem? Or is there not? Is there something you must resolve, a question that must be answered now? An underlying pressure to maintain a particular identity, to fill a raw, empty hole inside you, to figure out finally who you are and what you're doing here. Is there something you must do to prevent things from completely falling apart? It is so easy to dismiss these archaic companions of uncertainty and nervousness, to conclude that their presence is clear and convincing evidence that something is wrong with you, that something must urgently be shifted, or that some sort of profound error has occurred. Further, these types of experiences are certainly not very spiritual, are they? if you were fully in the now, accepting everything the way it is, resting in a high vibration and manifesting what you want and deserve, would you be feeling this way? Isn't the goal of the inner journey to do away with this primordial anxiety once and for all? What if others knew you were feeling like this, especially your spiritual friends, or students, or clients, or new partner? What would they think? Maybe they would turn from you in the discovery that you are human after all. Or would they? Or would you instead become closer? Would the barrier between you and life finally fall away? These questions can be relentless. It is an act of self-kindness to take some time to explore all of this with as much patience, curiosity, and courage that you can muster. What conclusions do you come to in the face of uninvited waves of anxiety, panic, unease, and dissatisfaction? To what degree have you come to believe that the simple presence of these energies serves as accurate evidence that something is wrong with you, that you're unworthy of love, that you're just not okay as you are? It can be helpful to ask these questions and pay close attention to what you discover, allowing yourself to refrain from taking the first response that bubbles up as your deepest truth. Often, though not always, the first answer is a knee-jerk reaction, a function of your conditioned history and a reflection of avoidance strategies that arose at an earlier time. Be willing to sit in the intensity and contradictory energy of the question without needing to immediately scramble into an answer. As Rainer Maria Rilke, the beloved Austrian poet and novelist, reminds us so beautifully, be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. While feelings of shakiness, uncertainty, groundlessness are conventionally viewed as obstacles and mistakes to be corrected and cured, the invitation is to discover for yourself if this is actually true. There is another view of this material that is much more vast, majestic, and purposive, rooted in the observation that the psyche is always in a movement toward wholeness. Even the most disturbing symptoms are attempts at integration, ways that psyche is making sense of your experience and pulling you toward deeper levels of meaning and purpose. As an experiment, you can hold these feelings and inner stirrings as the possible expression of high voltage guidance, pure information, and sacred data. The invitation here is to make the commitment to no longer pathologize the activity of intense, disturbing, and fierce energies within you. Instead, daring to honor their workability, validity, and the hidden wisdom that is buried in their core. From this non-shaming and compassionate holding space, you can inquire as to whether the disquiet, shakiness, and unsurety, though misunderstood and dismissed in our modern world, are in reality forerunners of breakthrough, special representatives of the sacred death rebirth cycle. As part of your contemplation, you can explore whether the freedom and aliveness you are so genuinely longing for will ever be found in transforming, replacing, or even healing this tender vulnerability in the core of your being, or whether your deepest yearnings will be met by way of entering into relationship with it, by opening your heart to it, by daring to practice intimacy with it, by no longer apologizing for it. As unique, unprecedented, one-of-a-kind human beings wired to discover meaning, purpose, and depth, despite our cultural and spiritual fantasies to the contrary, we quite naturally experience waves of anxiety from time to time. This word anxiety has come to be associated with something deeply problematic, unworkable, invalid, and certainly not very spiritual. When we meet someone who reports that they're feeling anxious, or these feelings and sensations arise in our own experience, our initial response is often rooted in the perception that something has gone wrong, that we are ill, broken, neurotic, or worse. There's not often much curiosity or interest in exploring the nature of this experience, the life and information that is surging under the surface, or much openness to the possibility that the anxiety might actually be a messenger, an admittedly wrathful sort of guide, arising to point us into a deeper exploration of what is most important to us, to something we may have forgotten in all the busyness, schedules, and stress of our overly structured lives. Before I go any further, I want to clarify what I mean when I use the word anxiety, and to distinguish what we might call existential anxiety from a more serious and debilitating clinical condition that is the result of an injury to the brain, profound trauma, or other situations where a person's physiological and psychological symptoms have debilitated them to the point where they're unable to function in ordinary life. Without such distinction, the perspective being offered here could appear misattuned, lacking in compassion, and even dangerous. The invitation and guidance offered in this book is intended for those with adequate ego development who are struggling with the ordinary concerns of love and work, as Freud described it. It is meant to address what we might call existential anxiety that arises daily in the lives of all human beings as they face the wide open and unresolvable nature of their lives, pointing to the first noble truth of the Buddha, and to address the shaky, uncertain angst that very organically underlies the realities of birth, old age, sickness, and death. The suggestions here are not intended for those with very debilitating forms of clinical anxiety. These situations usually require a different modality of treatment, including in some cases medication, regular supervised treatment, and other biologically oriented approaches. When you're caught in cascading ruminative thinking, and the emotions, feelings, and sensations that often accompany or underlie it, it can be helpful to return into the body and allow the word anxiety to fall away. This word has become inextricably associated with something horrid and unworkable, and it is a disembodied, experience distant concept for many. As you release the word, you can become increasingly curious about what you're actually being asked to meet in any given here and now moment. What is actually here in your immediate, non-interpretive experiencing? Something alive is occurring, that is for sure, and it is requesting a moment of your care and attunement. The more these feelings are abandoned as they arise, the more the circuitry is enforced that they're unworkable, invalid, and an accurate representation that something is wrong with you. You can honor the truth that it feels as if something is wrong, while simultaneously cultivating the courage to go into your experience and see if this feeling is a true representation of reality, to explore whether it is a reliable indicator of a current threat in the here and now. As you deepen in your inquiry and train yourself for short periods of time to stay with the feelings and sensations that are moving within you, you may discover that there is no ongoing, solid, continuous thing called anxiety that is happening to you from the outside. This may seem like such an ordinary thing to realize, but when you fully allow on the implications of this, you may be astonished at the energy that is released and the freedom you might discover. It's important to remember that the word anxiety is a concept, and as with all concepts, is one step removed from the actuality of your lived embodied experience. Underneath the very loaded word in a given moment of here and now experience, the concept anxiety overlays a unique, alive, unprecedented arrangement of physical sensation, emotion, feeling tone, and conceptual narrative, at times accompanied and fueled by mental visual imagery, as well as an impulse to take action. Becoming aware of what is actually happening in each of these levels of experience, one at a time, can help you approach what is happening in a bite-sized way, rather than feeling you need to confront the anxiety all at once, as if it were an enemy you were being called to go to war with. No, what is happening now is a fluttering in your belly, some constriction in your throat, some repetitive thoughts about being unsafe, a feeling tone of restlessness and claustrophobia, and so forth. Relating to your experience this way requires kindness, courage, and curiosity, and allows you greater perspective to explore what is truly happening and the purpose or meaning these symptoms might have in your life. It provides an opportunity for you to practice new levels of awareness and self-love. In this way, your anxiety is not an enemy coming at you from the outside, but a mindfulness bell, an invitation coming from deep within you to come closer, to become so curious about who and what you are, and to recommit to your life exactly as it is. Once you connect in a very direct way with what is actually happening within you, instead of primarily with the interpretation of what is happening and the habitual conclusions you have come to about what it all means, you may sense that continuing to claim you are suffering from anxiety is a subtle form of self-abandonment and even self-violence. For those who struggle with anxiety, this can be a difficult reframing to let in. But please remember, this is all just an experiment. I do not claim to know what is true or most accurate for you. I'm simply inviting you into another level of inquiry and sharing what I have discovered in my own experience as well as in my work with others. As always, please do not take my word for it, but explore deeply for yourself, testing anything shared in this book in the fire of your own direct experience. And if it does not resonate, please discard it and return into what is most true for you. Yes, the symptoms of anxiety can be disturbing and can be quite icky. It can feel as if you won't make it, that your very survival is at risk, that if you stay for another moment with the feelings coursing through you, that you will fall apart. The question is this: are these feelings accurate representations of the deepest truth of your situation in the here and now? This is not an inquiry to take lightly, but one to make slowly, over time, with curiosity and an open heart, so you can see for yourself what is most true now, not what was true when you were a young child, not what some spiritual teacher or therapist or author said may be true, not what your spouse or your family believes is true, but what is actually most true for you in the fire of your own direct experience. You can fully honor these feelings of pending dysregulation and shutdown while at the same time challenging their real-time accuracy and the historic storyline that has become wrapped around them. There is no need to judge any experience you are having, pathologize it, or question its validity. But it is an act of kindness to hold the intention to discover what is most true in a moment, and to see if there is a deeper call from within to reauthor the narrative and bring it up to date, weaving a more integrated, present time, nuanced story about who you are and what is happening. Slow down and return to the here and now, while simultaneously honoring the past movement of the there and then. Remain committed to what is most true in present time. In so doing, you train yourself to touch, contain, and even practice a certain kind of intimate holding toward the sensations, emotions, and storylines that have previously come to be associated with overwhelm and unbearable feeling. In this, you can discover for yourself if your feelings are in fact harming you, if your survival is actually at risk, and if there might be a wiser, more skillful, and more compassionate way to care for yourself in the wake of what is moving within you. It's easy to dismiss waves of anxiety, angst, and apprehension, to conclude that their presence is clear evidence that something is wrong. And while it's perfectly natural to want to take some sort of action to calm the storm, we don't want to do so at the expense of our own growth and evolution. Before we rush to quell the symptoms, we can practice attuning to what is arising to be met. We can practice holding, containing, tolerating, and opening into it in a given moment of time. In this way, we may come to discover that our freedom, even our healing, is not dependent upon making these symptoms go away, but upon befriending them, getting curious about them, and investigating our actual experience as it unfolds from moment to moment. The project of fixing me is birthed in the unending war of self-improvement waged from unexamined emotional conclusions about what intense and disturbing feelings mean about who you are as a person at the deepest levels. Many have discovered how exhausting the journey of self-improvement has become and are aching for deep rest, an ancient sort of relaxing into their lives as they are, which is not dependent upon first fixing our emotions or replacing one experience with another. The notion that you can be free within the experience of anxiety can be boggling to the mind, but the body and the heart know this truth. that your freedom is not dependent upon the appearance or disappearance of any particular psychological, emotional, or somatic phenomena. Dare to consider that you are not broken simply because waves of sensation, emotion, and narrative are surging in and out of your open psyche, your raw heart, and your tender nervous system. You are not a project to be fixed, but a mystery coming into form. This doesn't mean that you love these feelings or that it is easy or that you hope they stay forever. It simply means that you're no longer willing to abandon yourself or pathologize the movement of feeling within you. It means you are willing to explore the possibility that moving away from what is the root cause of so much of your suffering and struggle. It can be astonishing to discover in a truly embodied way that there is no suffering inherent in waves of unease in the belly, constriction in the throat, racing in the heart, or even the ruminative thinking that passes through your mind. Rather, it is the abandonment of yourself and your experience that plants the seeds for future struggle. Again, please do not take mine or anyone's word for this. Go into the laboratory of your own body and heart and see finally what is most true now. From this place of curiosity, slowing down, and the longing to know what is most accurate, you can then wisely, skillfully, and compassionately explore the following questions. What if this anxiety is not an error or mistake that I must correct, but a messenger sent by some part of me that is longing to be met? An indication and forerunner of wholeness, and a fierce and often disturbing guide and invitation toward integration. What have I abandoned in myself out of unmet shame, grief, despair, and fear that now longs to be allowed back into the majesty of what I am? What are my psyche, my heart, and my body attempting to reveal to me? What are all these symptoms saying about me and my life, about where I have been and where I want to go, about where I will discover true meaning, about how I have been living, about my purpose, about what is truly most important to me? Not what I've learned should be important, or what my parents or spiritual teachers or therapists have suggested is most important, but what is most alive for me. And will I have the courage to open into that journey of individuation that will allow me to discover and live from the deepest truths that I know inside? Something is knocking at the door of your heart. What is it? While it may appear that it is knocking from the outside, get curious and look again. Maybe the waves of sensation, emotion, and narrative are intelligent yet non-conventional invitations into the sacred world that is always already here. Perhaps the kindest act of self-care and self-love is to finally slow down and see, to be willing to set aside everything you have concluded about who and what you are, about who and what others are, and about what this life is all about. To return to the mind and heart of the beginner and re-enter the mystery. And to finally discover whether the feelings and sensations themselves are the cause of your struggle, or whether it is the abandonment and rejection of them, bolstered by the conclusions you've come to about what these feelings mean. There is no answer here. It really is just an experiment in radical self-care. At the edge of a cliff, why am I not changing? Why have I not healed yet? Why do I keep engaging in the same limiting habits and patterns, choosing the same type of unfulfilling partner and still being unable to find meaning in my work and relationships? Why am I not feeling grateful, joyful, and able to appreciate all the things I have? Isn't this what I was promised when I took up the inner journey? What about all this fear, anger, jealousy, and confusion? And why, despite having so many blessings in my life, am I feeling flat and uninspired? As seekers, these questions can haunt us, and we can spend an incredible amount of life energy consumed by them. But what is the way through? Part of us entertains the very seductive and compelling notion that we might just set aside our historic conditioning and finally just choose love over fear or joy over despair, sort of the way we might choose one type of green smoothie over another at our favorite natural food store. We're bombarded with all sorts of promises that this or that course or process, this or that book or method, this or that new lover, or this or that spiritual teacher will come in and finally remove it all in one cosmic stroke of unbelievably fantastic and awesome grace. Even though we may chuckle at the absurdity of it when it's stated this way, if we look deeper, we might be astonished to see how active the archetype of the Savior truly is, in the personal as well as in the collective. As with all archetypes, there's nothing inherently neurotic or problematic about Savior energy. The invitation is to be in conscious relationship with it. Perhaps you are the Savior that you've been looking for. Many of us remain quite invested in our avoidant and protective strategies, but the details of this investment tend to dance outside conscious awareness, influencing our perception and our behavior just below the surface. These ways of interacting with others in the world, which have formed the templates from which we orient, are not just random and neurotic. They were formed intelligently to help us engage a world that was so much bigger than us, that was overwhelming, one in which we needed to do whatever we could to fit in, to be seen, to be accepted, to receive some modicum of love and attunement. These things are not negotiable in the developing brain and nervous system of a little one wired for empathic connection. One of the most important inquiries on the path of awakening and healing is an open-hearted and non-shaming exploration of the ways we may be holding on to these strategies and perceptual filters, and how they might still be serving a function. Because they operate mostly outside conscious awareness, it can take time and practice to uncover what may be going on behind the scenes. In my experience, it's very difficult to get to the depths of this material on our own. An attuned therapist, a wise and trustworthy friend, or an empathic, intimate partner can all help us if this is the contract we have with them. It can come as quite a shock to see that we're still benefiting from holding on to embedded ways of protection and avoidance that, on a conscious level, we believe we've outgrown or transcended through all our inner work. This realization can generate disappointment, judgment, and deflation, and has a way of catalyzing profound humility if allowed in. Rather than overly identifying with the disappointment and following it down the rabbit hole of unworthiness and self-aggression, we can use it as fuel for our inquiry, for a heartfelt commitment to know the truth of our experience, even those aspects that are humiliating, embarrassing, and shameful. can help us make real-time decisions about how we will move forward. Once we acquire some insight into our current investment in the developmental strategies of an earlier time, we can make a more conscious, here and now, adult level decision as to whether we're truly open to challenging these strategies, reauthor the narrative of our lives, and re-envision the way we've come to perceive ourselves and others. In my experience, this isn't something that you can choose one day and accomplish the next by way of a powerful weekend workshop. It is difficult work that unfolds over time and never ends in some grand realization that you can list on your spiritual resume. Your heart is endlessly deep and your body is an endless temple. To set aside the ways that you've come to defend yourself against the tenderness and depth of what you are would require that you first return your conscious awareness directly to those parts you have disowned at an earlier time. All of the feelings, emotions, images, fantasies, complexes, personas, and the entirety of the shadow in all its forms. The fears of intimacy, the anxiety around death, the panic of abandonment, all of it. Most have spent their lives organizing their experience around minimizing or altogether avoiding contact with this material. A strategy that makes sense from the perspective of maintaining a kind of homeostasis and status quo. The question, however, is whether the status quo is really going to cut it for you, or whether you're called to something else. It is important to see that these organizing principles are not the expression of some neurotic intrapsychic conflict, but are relational strategies rooted in regulating what would otherwise be an avalanche of overwhelming anxieties. While we all may have some hope that we are ready and willing to release these strategies all at once, it doesn't really work like that. The wholesale dismantling of our defensive organization is not recommended. In fact, to do so is often more an expression of self-aggression and fear than it is of wisdom and kindness, as it is only the ego that feels the need to storm its own castle and tear itself down. It can't be emphasized enough that our defensive organization serves a protective function. It emerged in a young brain and nervous system as a way to guard us from overwhelming emotional states that we simply could not metabolize on our own at that stage of development. We learned very quickly how to stay as far out of harm's way as possible, how to receive the affection and attention we needed, and how to survive emotionally, psychically, and sometimes even physically, until we are developmentally mature enough to go back into, contain, and metabolize the anxiety and existential groundlessness that wait for us on the other side. We should be mindful of what is required and tread carefully and kindly, pushing ourselves a bit, but not into overwhelm generated by impatience or by way of reenactments of unworthiness and shame. But what to do now? Where to go from here? You aren't likely to urgently disassemble your defensive organization in a rush to transcendence. But at the same time, you can no longer ignore the call of transformation and healing that rages within you. In the wake of receiving this call, many have found themselves standing on the edge of a cliff, with the known behind and the unknown stretching out before them. On the one hand, there is the lure of what has come before: familiarity, safety, security, and certainty. While on the other is a thundering longing to dive into uncharted waters, to swim in the wholeness of the ocean of love and be transparent to its movement. not exactly sure what will come next, but all the while sensing an opportunity that has been laid out in front of them to turn back toward those parts that they've spent their lives avoiding and provide the attunement and holding they have yet to receive. While your strategies of protection have provided a critical level of care, the time has now come for you to consider reorganization. The invitation is to open into the unknown without demanding that same level of protection, moving at a speed that is provocative and challenging, but not so quick that you become overwhelmed and fragmented. These realizations, these insights, this renewal of the vow of wholeness, this is not an ordinary moment. In fact, it is the heralding of a new world. To reintegrate what has fallen out of awareness is one of the most rewarding and difficult tasks you are asked to embody on the path of love. Yet it offers fruit beyond your imagination. There is a trade-off, though. You will no longer be able to go back to the way it was, not in the same way. You will no longer be able to stay on the sidelines, relying on the old ways to protect you from the wide open, groundless, ever-changing, wildly alive, and creative dimensions of reality in your true nature. While the foreshadowing of this new reality is exhilarating, it can also be quite disorienting. It's important to recognize the immensity of this and to engage the journey with slowness, mindfulness, and compassion. Living in this way in the unknown, while simultaneously terrifying and exciting, elicits a sense that anything is possible. It may be confusing, at least at first, but one thing is certain. Only through kindness can you approach your neurotic organization and defensive strategies. There is no other way. You need to be willing to make the most radical commitment you could ever make to the truth of your experience exactly as it unfolds, and to receiving whatever appears in a holding field of warmth and compassion. Nothing need be discarded. Nothing is non-spiritual. Everything is valid. Everything is path. Everything is God. Yes, you may be asked to stay with some very groundless states of confusion, uncertainty, vulnerability, and the unknown, open to the possibility that the rug will be pulled out again, with heartbreak and deflation on the other side. But heartbreak and deflation are sacred, and I think this is a trade-off you're willing to make. A breakdown that is whole. At times you may become aware of a wave of despair rising and falling within you. You're feeling down, hopeless, uninspired, and unable to find any meaning. It's as if something has been lost or is just off in some unexplainable way. But you can't quite pin it down. Everyone around you seems so content and joyful, enjoying their lives. What is wrong with me, you ask? There's a deeply embedded cultural fantasy that you shouldn't feel depressed, that this sort of downheartedness is a clear sign that something has gone wrong, that you have failed and are flawed in some fundamental way. Oh, and by the way, it's not very spiritual, is it? I mean, what about staying in the now, loving what is, accepting the moment, laws of attraction, and all that? I mean, would a spiritual person feel depressed? We seem to be quite confused about all this. But what if this lowliness were a legitimate experience, a messenger of some sort that is trying to break through an old dream, an outdated image, a worn-out narrative about yourself and something you thought was so important? What if in the totality of what you are, a wave of unhappiness is just as authentic and genuine as a wave of happiness, laying the ground for something new and unexpected to emerge? in a way that the mind might find crazy or even dangerous? What if we were to dare to see that even a moment of depression is valid and an attempt of psyche to communicate? Love not only takes form as flow, sweetness, and so-called positive feelings, but at times as the activity of death and deflation, reorienting old vision so rebirth can occur. This cycle is the essence of creativity and appears to be non-negotiable on the path of the heart and of individuation, becoming who you truly are. While we do not get to choose whether the energies of death and rebirth dance within us, we seem to have some choice as to whether we will willingly participate in this truth or not, whether we will greet it with self-aggression or kindness, whether we will dare to see it not as a mistake, but as a potential opportunity, even if we cannot at this time attune to its guidance. To open and attune in this way does not require that we like what is happening, love it, or even accept it. It means that whether we like it or not, we know firsthand that arguing with what is the root cause of so much of our struggle. Yes, the experience is disturbing and intense, but before we throw it out as useless, let us take a moment and turn toward it, and open to the possibility that it is purposeful. The appearance of this sort of anguish can serve as a very piercing invitation to re-examine what is most important, where you've been, where you're headed, and where you will turn to find new meaning and purpose. Have you been living your own life or somebody else's? Whose choices have you been making? Whose dreams have you been dreaming? The appearance of this existential despair can signal the death of an old dream, the falling away of an outdated persona, or the realization that your current life, including a certain relationship or a way of working in the world, is no longer large enough to hold who and what you are, or what is longing to come next. The images you have been working so hard to maintain are no longer vast enough to contain the mystery of you and your life, and must be sacrificed for a greater vision. While this sacrifice is often painful and disturbing, it is sacred from the perspective of wholeness. It is a holy disorientation that is not always perceivable in the midst of the chaos. During these times of psychic transition and reorganization, what we conceive of as the purpose of our life begins to crumble and fall apart, and the rug is pulled away. What is the new reference point around which we'll organize? Where are the identities we were once able to rest in and find meaning? As if this dissolution isn't enough on its own, nothing has arrived to replace the old with something new. We are between worlds, without the past to lean into, but also without any future that we can look to for solid ground and inspiration. We're in the realm of Hermes, guide of the liminal and the dead, and in the undefined space between it all. Yes, it can be disorienting and bewildering in this place, but has something gone wrong? Is death wrong? Must we scramble urgently to replace it with life? Does any of this make sense on the path of the heart? While it is not easy, it is possible to open to what is happening and approach the breakdown as holy, to reframe the entire process in a way that honors the radical and uncompromising nature of what it means to be an alive, sensitive human being, going against the grain of a society that has turned from the darkness out of a deep fear of its wildly creative, reorganizing nature. But what if this collapse was intelligent? and a forerunner of new life. Not an expression of pathology, but of a wrathful, non-conventional sort of grace. The journey of death rebirth is by its very nature disturbing, not in promotion of the status quo and not supportive of our cultural and spiritual fantasies that you're not supposed to feel anxious or depressed, and that these and other darker feelings are evidence that somehow you're doing something wrong, lacking in faith or gratitude, lost in the ego, need to meditate more or better, ignorant of some law of attraction, or must surrender more or differently. And if you were truly waking up and healing, you would be bearing witness to a more continuous flow of happiness, high vibration, bliss. But what if happiness is not going to meet your deepest longing? What if happiness is not at the deepest level what you're after, but rather meaning and a full spectrum sort of aliveness? What if you were sent here to this place for something much more majestic and even magical than happiness? There's nothing wrong with moments of joy, periods of contentment, surges of bliss, for these too are aspects of your true nature. But you are vast. You contain multitudes, and you may never be satisfied with only one band of the spectrum. It's important to note that my use of the term depression here and throughout the book is not meant to refer to a clinical diagnosis, which is a very serious condition that can be profoundly debilitating for those suffering from it. In most cases, such depression requires ongoing professional assessment and treatment, including medication at times and other biologically based interventions. I want to contrast this with what I call existential depression, which all of us face from time to time as a natural result of ordinary human suffering, the falling away of a job or death of a loved one, chronic pain and illness, the ending of an intimate relationship, the loss of hope and meaning. This type of depression is a natural function of being alive, is not pathological, and is part of what makes us human. Existential depression can also arise without any obvious cause, as a reflection of the fragile and tenuous nature of our existence, knowing that one day we will die and no longer be able to participate in this precious world or be in contact with those we love. It is this existential depression that I'm referring to in this book. Those times in our lives when we feel down, flat, hopeless, despairing. While it is certainly possible that the perspective and strategies offered here may be of help to those suffering from clinical depression, this book is not intended to replace more conventional treatment, which often requires a breadth and complexity that is not possible via the poetic prescriptions that are offered here. Similarly, while those suffering from other clinically diagnosed conditions such as obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, PTSD, schizophrenia, social anxiety, phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, may derive some help, benefit, and relief from the words and inquiries suggested here, it is beyond the scope of this book to provide the clinically based treatment that these conditions usually require. Please keep this in mind if you or a close friend or family member have received such diagnosis, and care for yourself by seeking out professional help. It is difficult, but possible to befriend waves of numbness and depression as carriers of a certain kind of life, though theirs is a signature that does not conform to conventional ideas about who you are and what you're doing here. Depth, meaning, and information are often buried in these experiences, but you must open in new ways to receive this level of guidance. These visitors come not as obstacles, but as invitations for you to slow down and provide safe passage to something that needs to die within you. so that you may lay the groundwork for new forms of love to emerge, be reborn, and flourish. It takes a tremendous amount of courage, curiosity, and self-care to go into this material and open to it. For it is not what is normally presented as what is required on the path of healing and inner work. But love is not only peaceful, calming, and creative. At times it's wrathful, dark, and destructive. In fact, it is everything, and a partial love is never going to do, for you are wired for something immense. The petals are unfolding. In each moment, the archetypal journey of crucifixion, resurrection, and transfiguration is being enacted within you. Each breath, each image, each symbol, each feeling and sensation, something unprecedented is attempting to break through. The signs are all around, and the guidance is longing to emerge. But it is easy to miss in a world that is forgotten. While the forms love takes, relationships, life circumstances, and the way you thought it would all turn out, will inevitably be crucified and resurrected. This is the native way of form, and is not evidence of error, but of wholeness. Love itself, though, is beyond birth and death, and is eternally transfiguring into greater levels of integration. On this new day, which may appear ordinary from the perspective of the conventional, the invitation is into depth. There is nothing ordinary about what you are. Your body is a temple greater than even the sun and the moon. Buried within the inner sanctum, petals are unfolding that are filled with vision and information for the way ahead. Look carefully. Listen closely, attuned to what has been longing to be known. Provide a sanctuary for the unmet, the unheld, and the unintegrated to return home. Honor the forms of love as they appear, but allow them to depart so they may continue their journey. For it is one of cosmic creativity. Yes, your heart may break as the forms dissolve in front of your very eyes. But it is by way of this breaking that you may be resurrected once again. Dancing within the opposites. Learning to suffer consciously is an art that has been lost in our times. By training yourself to enter into an intimate, curious, embodied relationship with difficult psychological and emotional experience, you reclaim your right as an alive, sensitive, empowered human being, and proclaim your willingness to practice transmutation for the benefit of life everywhere. Each time we turn from a painful feeling, bodily sensation, or disturbing emotion, we practice self-aggression, encoding circuitry of self-abandonment as we hope to end run the reality of our vulnerability. As I discussed earlier, this split-off material is not healed, but placed into the shadow, where it is sure to surge in less than conscious ways in our relational world. We need only look around and inside with eyes wide open to see the consequences of this. It is by way of compassionate confrontation and integration of the full spectrum that we dance within the opposites and provide sanctuary for the unconscious to come into form. Through this integrative and consecrated activity, the meaning of our experience will be revealed, and its role on the journey ahead clarified. At times, the ally will appear in a sweet, peaceful, and light form, which we can take refuge in and be grateful for. At other times, the form will be fierce, wrathful, and of the dark, oriented not in peace, but in wholeness. While not as easy, we can come to be grateful for this one as well, who has not come to harm, but to reveal. While the mind may turn from the wisdom and the love buried inside the shadows, the heart knows, the body knows. The re-enchantment of healing. There's a lot of talk about integrating or healing traumatic experience, which has led to a lot of confusion. It's important to re-envision these words as they have in large part lost their relevance, aliveness, and magic. Additionally, for many, they have become further tools of shame, blame, and self-attack, reenactments of an early environment lacking in empathic attunement. We must breathe life back into these ideas in an imaginative, grounded, and creative way. Often what is meant by integrating or healing trauma, loosely defined here as any experience characterized by unbearable or overwhelming affect, is that one day we will get over it, transcend it, meditate or manifest it away, or otherwise purge it from what we are. In my clinical experience and sitting in the fire alongside many courageous men and women with the most heartbreaking histories, this view of trauma is in large part inaccurate, aggressive, misguided, and at times even dangerous and violent. There are some things that happen to us that we will never get over, nor would this even be an appropriate goal or lens to use in approaching the sacredness of the human temple. Let us set aside any spirituality or healing that is unconsciously or subtly rooted in self-abandonment, self-attack, and self-hatred, and replace it with slowness, empathy, and a grounded, relentless compassion. We must re-enchant this entire area of inquiry with presence and with love. But if what we mean by integration is discovering a place inside us where we can hold and contain our experience, make sense of what happened in new ways, and discover deeper meaning, then these concepts can come alive again, slowly over time, guided by new levels of kindness, clear seeing, and multi-leveled awareness. We can begin to bear that which has been unbearable and provide sanctuary and safe passage for the shards of the broken world to reorganize. As we train ourselves to re-inhabit our bodies, even in the face of profoundly disturbing cognitions, feelings, and sensations, we can begin to weave a more integrated narrative of our lives, reauthoring the sacred story of who we are, our purpose here, and what is most important to us. We can gather the pieces into a coherent whole and begin to trust in the validity of our experience again. The goal then is not some fixed state where we have successfully purged an aspect of our self-experience from what we are, as if it were some wretched foreign substance, but rather to find a larger home for it within us. Slowly, we can allow what has become frozen and solidified to thaw and become flexible. Ultimately, it is love, in the most resplendent sense of the word, that will soften the wounds of the body and the heart, for they will never unwind in an environment of self-aggression. It's just not safe or majestic enough there. Over time, beyond merely holding and containing the sacred wound, we're invited to practice intimacy with it, to come even closer than we imagined possible to the lost children of Psyche and Soma, discovering that they have not come to harm us, but only to return home, to resume their instinctive place in the inner family. In this way, perhaps we can salvage concepts such as integration and healing, at least for today, re-envisioning and re-enchanting them with the force of an uncompromising and unapologetic compassion, soaked in the wisdom essence of our true nature, as we open into the mystery together.